All right, welcome back to Tech Time Radio. I'm your host, Nathan Moe. Mike, what did you think about the whiskey during the break?
It's really good.
All right, well, this is the Ezra Brooks 99 proof bourbon whiskey. It's $25 a bottle. It is Scotland malt, sherry, spice, and floral aromas and flavors that dominate the malt gentle Scott special signature of 12 hand-chosen single malts.
It's got a slow burn, but it's a good tasting burn.
It really does taste good.
Yeah.
So I think so. Mr. Miller, who didn't like our whiskey last week, even though we both liked it, so he liked it. He thought this was pretty good, and it is a sour. It's a little bit of a sour, a sour mash bourbon whiskey. So we got more to drink of that. So that's fantastic. You know what's really bad about this?
We have
Stones?
to drink more whiskey.
We're gonna have to drink more whiskey because it literally took up half the glass there. So it's not really a shot. It's like a half a shot.
Dang it!
All right. Well, let's move on to our next segment. We have an expert that is going to be joining us. Essentially, we have Dominique Enhorn. First, he is not an American. He is a French businessman who has earned his fortune in the U.S. digital revolution. 2 years back, he left the smog of Los Angeles, but not to retire. His project was ambitious to set up the world's largest rural startup incubator and accelerator called UNIQORN, and turn a 118-year-old franchise of rugby, Sarlat Rugby, into a social media powerhouse. This SEO expert is joining us from France, where it's like 2 o'clock in the morning. Let's start our next segment.
This is a segment we call Ask the Experts.
All right, we're excited about having our founder and CEO on the line here. Dom, tell us a little bit about yourself. Thank you for joining. What time is it in France right now? I know it's really late.
It's more drinking time on my side than on your side. That's what I know.
Is that what we know? Okay. All right. So
that's what time it is.
That's 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, I think. So Dom, tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us about how you first had an online art auction company that you've sold. Tell us a little bit of your background before we start asking some questions here.
Sure. Well, I grew up in France, half French, half German. Moved to the U.S. in 1993. Immediately got immersed in the digital marketing space. My first foray in that space revolved around a online art auction. I can't draw, so I was always fascinated by art. And it took off early on. Was purchased by a larger company about a year later. Continued in the same space in the late 90s, early 2000s. Had a lot of experience in the digital travel space, online travel space, as well as in the finance space. And, I left France for the U.S. intending to stay 2 weeks. I came back 25 years later, which was in 2018, and launched UNIQORN with a Q, which today is one of the largest, if not the largest, incubator and accelerator of technology startups.
So tell us a little bit about that. We're going to spend a lot more time on the rugby stuff so Dom and I had a nice conversation. I think it was like a 15-minute conversation that went to 45 minutes. So we talked about a lot of different areas. But let's talk about specifically UNIQORN, right? Because that's your main company that you work at, probably 9 to 5, not really, but you probably work at there 9 to 5, and then you work from 5 to 2 in the morning at your sports process of how it goes. So tell us a little bit about UNIQORN, what it's about, what your plans are, and some of the investor aspects of that.
Yeah. So, initially the idea was to provide a healthier living space outside of big metropolitan areas, outside of big cities, to young and older startup entrepreneurs. So that was roughly we had the idea in 2017. I always intended to move back to France at some point. We packed our bags early 2018, set up for the move. As we moved, we knew that we wouldn't be moving from Los Angeles to Paris. So my wife and I, we crisscrossed France. We visited 56 medium to small size cities. We settled on Sarlat because of its sheer beauty, and we figured, why not set up shop here? Beautiful rivers, 1,001 castles in a 30-mile radius. And we just did it. We just went for it, and things grew very, very quickly. Obviously, COVID accelerated the pace, the exodus from big cities to smaller towns, including in France and in surrounding countries. Today, we're roughly 60 people inside of UNIQORN from 27 different countries.
Fantastic. That tells you that, you know what, you can still be prosperous during the COVID-19 aspects if you can pivot and change and dynamically provide value for individuals in the market itself.
Oh, yeah.
So let me ask you, I'm consulting for a French oven place. So let me ask you this question here. Do you have, or do you know of a Leconche stove by chance?
I'm not sure why you need an oven with the weather you got right there right now. So
Okay.
He's a glutton for punishment.
So I'm curious. I've never been into the French stove areas, but I was consulting.
no,
with this.
there are a lot of them. There are a lot of them. French and Italian stoves. I don't know them. It's not my area, but there are quite a few of them.
There's
yes.
quite a few. Okay, well, I had to ask the question. If you would have said yes, I would have been, oh, that's amazing, because
Way to go.
There you go. Okay, all right. Well, let's continue.
Let's move on.
That didn't go as good as I thought it would have. Okay, all right. So let's talk about turning a 118-year-old franchise into a social media darling. Okay, so I had the ability of owning a minor league basketball team in the Pacific Northwest. It was a dream come true on my bucket list, and it was a financial suck unlike I've ever done money before. And so we tried to do social media, and I think we were like the starlight of the whole league itself. But what happened is the league wasn't really good with social media or any aspects of that. So it really brought all the social media aspects that we were doing down. So let's talk first, Dom, about this. Let's talk about, you took over a team. What was the first thing that you looked at to do after purchasing a team to get it ready to move into the new generation with social media?
It was undoubtedly the brand, and with the brand, first and foremost, the logo. So you said something that's very interesting, which probably dates back to a few years. If I had to make this decision 10 years ago, I probably wouldn't have done it because it would have been too challenging to do it. Today, we live in a world where obviously impressions and first impressions are everything.
Yep.
You don't necessarily know whether what you're seeing on social media is real or an avatar. And very often it is an avatar. And I think that translates very well into what we've been able to do in terms of taking a very old franchise that was founded in 1903, a rugby franchise, which today plays semi-professional rugby in Europe at a relatively high level. Okay. But when we took it over, usually what I like to say is we took over a 118-year-old startup with a lot of skeletons in the closet. We started with a 25-yard penalty when we took it over. And literally, as we opened up drawers, everything was falling onto us. And that was about 15 months ago. When we took it over, also, the team had roughly 1,000 followers on social media. Today, we have over 200,000 combined. We've signed broadcast agreements for our games, including in the U.S., and we've been able to build a burgeoning brand that has quadrupled its revenue during COVID with no games being played.
Wow.
So explain that to us. Explain what are some of the key aspects here of the first. So you take over a team, totally understand that, right? So you have probably lots of meetings with some old timers that say, hey, we've always done it this way. We've done it this way. You're coming in with a brand new vision, direction. How do you go about making that change? And what are some of the key technology items that you've used to, and congratulations on getting the U.S. to pick up your rugby games, and I'm excited about that. I like rugby. I actually have watched rugby pretty aggressively, more aggressively than I ever will watch soccer, because I find rugby to be very interesting. What's that?
You're right in Sounders territory.
I know. We're in the Sounders territory. But let me just tell you, rugby is very entertaining. Awesome. The way they throw the ball in, the way they have the scrum. But what is the first thing that you do when you take over a team like that? How do you say, hey, guys, we need to grow our social media audience. We need to be active in that. What did you do to get those things going?
Well, I think the first thing we did was to set a baseline and get everybody on the same page, because obviously it's difficult to come in cold into a place that's been, a franchise, a religious franchise, as I might say, for 118 years. So you're 100% right. A lot of older people in place that have been doing something for a long time, but just because you've been doing it for a long time doesn't mean you've been doing the right thing. So yes, we ruffled some feathers, but we moved in with an entire team, the entire UNIQORN team, and basically took over the brand from scratch, recreated the logo, created digital assets that didn't exist, an English website, a French website, a German website, a Spanish website. We created mobile apps that never existed before. Brand new rebranding for all of the imagery, all of the assets that have been shown around town. brand new merchandising assets, online stores. Today we have 30 derivative products, a mascot that nobody had ever seen before, which was sorely missing. We live and operate in a small town in the southwest of France that in the winter has 10,000 people, but in the summer has close to 3 million tourists. And nobody ever capitalized on the tourism aspect at all, just assuming that the people who would be visiting wouldn't be interested in rugby when in fact they are. So in a nutshell, as it stands, from the onset, we didn't really create anything that didn't yet exist. We just amalgamated a lot of the tools that we all have access to, and we just put them to the disposal of the team.
That's fantastic. So let's talk about logo, right? So you rebranded the logo, and that was kind of a big aspect of that. So when you do a logo rebranding for anything that you do, what type of time and effort did you go to that? Because I know some people, when they do a logo, they'll buy, I can just go and get one for $19 at Logos R Us down on the internet that's dirt cheap, and they put it together and no backing or information. What did you guys do to actually spend the time and make sure that your logo was a key part of your team?
Yeah, so first we wanted to make sure the logo really resonated with what the team stands for, that the long history would carry over into the look and feel, the colors, and the imagery of it all. And then we wanted to make sure that the logo would be aggressive because we are playing rugby, and would be truly representative of what we're trying to build in the future, not so much what existed in the past. So along with the logo, we also had a slight name change. So for those of you who speak French, the first, the acronym for the team was CASPN. And when I asked 10 old timers what that meant, 5 could tell me what it meant. The others did not. So we knew we had a branding issue from the start. So I asked them, what game does this team play? And they mumbled rugby. So I said, okay, at least we get one thing straight. And the second question I asked them is, where does this team play? And they said, well, here. I said, where is here? Here in Sarlat. I said, well, so it's no longer called the Crédit Athlétique Sarlat de Périgord. It's called Sarlat Rugby. And today, boom, here's Sarlat Rugby, right? So interesting, because what we needed to do is we needed to shake things up, because what had been in place just didn't resonate even with the local people. So that being a fact, we needed to create brand new imagery, brand new logo, brand new thematics, and test them out at a small scale, and then see how they would resonate in other parts of the world. Because as a local rugby team catering to a town of 10,000 people, there's no way that you can bring about the budget that you need to operate at higher levels. We went in, with the international aspect first and foremost. We realized that there was a crisis in many parts of the world, including the U.S., obviously, between what you guys have, the kneelers and the non-kneelers, and whatever people think about those, where there's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity in the sports business to bring a relatively new game, a contact sport, to a large swaths of population and get them interested and get them excited about it. So when I speak to Americans, for example, and football fans, and I explain them rugby, I said, think of American football without the pads, without protection, and in order to move forward, you got to throw the ball backwards. And they say, oh, I get it.
And they think they get it, and then there's a little bit more complexity to it. So there's a lot more. So when you when you run it back, you have to make sure you touch the ball down in the end zone, and you want to do it kind of or at the end line.
So is it fair to say that you took all this technology and just re-educated everybody about what you're doing with this team?
I think, yeah, in a sense, that is absolutely true. It's interesting you mentioned that, because when we first did it, we knew it would be a lot of work. And we set ourselves out, obviously as a technology firm, to say that at some point in the future, the need is there for other amateur teams. They have the exact same friction points, the exact same pain points. So instead of just building this for one team, we started platformizing it from the scratch from the very first day. And literally 6 months in, we had 30, 40, 50 other teams contacting us. How did you do this? Can you work with us? And recently, we've actually just signed with a soccer team, which is also relatively local, at a high level, a pro soccer team that we're doing the same thing for.
So now let's talk about the league too, right? Because when we talked about this, it seems to be the league looked to you as kind of the shining star and said, hey, let's develop some of our league aspects on this also and take some of your marketing expertise and your technology expertise to make it so that the league itself would kind of improve on aspects. Is that correct?
Yeah, so it's actually true for the rugby league and for the soccer league, obviously called football here in Europe, where you have a lot of legacy issues in terms of branding. Typically, either coaches or presidents, used to be former coaches and former players, they don't have a marketing mind, and they'll be the first to admit to that. And it's been very, very easy getting their attention and, getting them on board, with the concept that we launched internally, the platform called Challenger X, where they come to us and say, hey, we have a rebranding issue. We have a social media issue. Our digital assets don't produce what they're supposed to be producing. In many cases, they're set up as NGOs at the amateur level, relying exclusively on donations. Yet when you go to their website trying to make a donation, the plugging is not working. So that's obviously not a good thing. Especially if it's your sole revenue source, aside from ticketing and some special events that you may be running.
So that's really important, making sure that if you're going to be a charitable or a nonprofit or rely on donations, having all of your aspects of people being able to donate and generate those funds as needed. So let me ask you one question before we leave. If you are to take over a website for someone and help them in their social media, what is the first thing, whether UNIQORN or yourself, looks at on a website to say, you know what, we're going to need to make some changes because this is what you currently have?
I'd say the funnel. Whether you'd have to take a look at whether or not, first of all, what's the revenue model? What's the business model of that website? Is it purely driven by advertising, which is pretty rare today? In most cases, the intent is to convert a user into either an action or a transaction, i.e. a lead or an actual purchase, in which case you measure everything. Unlike 50 years ago, today we measure everything from A to Z, and you can measure it in a live environment, from the person landing on the page, doing some, heat mapping and see where they drop out, what the stick rate is, and what the attrition rate is, and just fix it on the fly. And most people don't do that. The second thing I would say is that instead of building it in hopes that it will come, we know they're coming, and hence we're building it. And it's usually not the way people operate and people launch websites. We've all done the mistake where we just decide to launch some digital assets, put them up, and then try to figure out how we're going to get people to come to us. Well, we use keyword data. We know how many people are searching for a specific keyword in any language on any device, month in, month out. That data is freely accessible. And based upon that data, we decide what to build and then how to convert them.
All right, so if I want to find out more about your rugby team or UNIQORN's all over all you got to do is spell UNIQORN with a Q, which is a perfect way to do it. So it's UNIQORN, and if you just put that in any Google search or MSN search, it's coming on up. But your rugby team isn't always the easiest to find, so how would people go and search for your rugby team so that they can watch games, maybe become a fan? Us in the Pacific Northwest are going to be watching your guys' games when we can. At least I will be. So how do we go about that?
Yeah, I had no impact on the name of the town, obviously, so it's a little more difficult, right? So It's Sarlat, Sarlat, sarlatrugby.com for the US version of the site. Very active on Facebook, same thing, Sarlat Rugby. Instagram, same thing. Reach out to us, follow us. We're in the process of launching a 24/7 rugby channel as well, which will be active within the next 3 weeks under sarlatrugby.tv. But once you're on our Facebook channel or Instagram, you'll be kept abreast.
Perfect. That's great. Well, we got fans here at Tech Time Radio. Thank you very much for joining the show today, and we wish you guys the best, and we will touch back with you again later during the season.
Thanks, Dom.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it very much.
Great. Thank you. All right. Well, there you go. Rugby team with technology, specifically the keyword searches and his SEO were his main aspects on what they did first before they decided to build the site itself. Really important.